When a person realizes the mind of non-discrimination, that attainment is the state of regarding each being as one's only child. This is none other than Buddha nature. We will awaken to it upon reaching the land of peace. The words of Shinran Shonin, the Hymns of the Pure Land, verse 92. Collected Works of Shinran, Volume 1, page 350. Nam. Hi, my name is Kerry, and I'm a racist, which is ironic because I grew up as a Jap in Los Angeles of the 1960s and 70s. I was born the middle child of second-generation Nisei parents in Los Angeles in 1960. We lived in a predominantly black neighborhood in South Central Los Angeles, which in reflection was the nice part of the bad part of Los Angeles. Both my mother and father, who despite being born American citizens in California, were forcibly relocated and illegally incarcerated in the so-called internment camps of World War II. My father graduated from high school in Poston Relocation Camp in Arizona, where he was also a Boy Scout. Dad never really talked about camp very much, except to describe how he spent his youth swimming, fishing, and playing sports. I grew up thinking, gee, camp sounds like fun. After the war ended, the family settled in Los Angeles in a black neighborhood, one of the few places where Japs were allowed to live. My father was drafted and served honorably in the United States Army during the Korean War. After the Korean War ended, he returned to Los Angeles, where he worked as a Japanese gardener, which was a thing during the 1950s and 60s. He fell in love with Mom and had 3 children. After he died, I was amazed to discover this badge, which is a California fishing license issued in 1950 that identifies my father as a citizen. In what universe do you have to be an American citizen to go fishing? My father was forced from his home, illegally incarcerated in the middle of the desert, and then drafted to serve in the military, defending the country that put him and 120,000 legal Japanese immigrants and American-born Japanese-American citizens in the internment camps less than 10 years before. Despite these experiences, my father was never bitter. He always smiled, he made people laugh, and he had kind words for everyone. I have always wanted to be like my father. Thanks, Dad. Happy Father's Day. That's me in the helmet there. I never really understood racism, what it meant, until I attended an all-black elementary school. The black kids would tease me. Hey, Chink, Ching Chong Chinaman, ha 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 ha. Usually I just smiled and ignored the teasing. But one day I completely lost it and I yelled back, I'm not a chink, I'm a Jap, you black person. Obviously I used a word that began with the letter N, which is how the black kids addressed each other. That day I learned the hard way that only blacks could address each other using that particular word. And I also learned to run really fast for an Asian. Eventually, I figured out that if I did the homework for the biggest, baddest kids, they'd leave me alone because they needed me alive to do their homework. I survived elementary school by learning to fit in to black culture of the 1960s. To this day, I love the Motown sound. I grew up wanting to be Michael Jackson of the Jackson 5. I remember the Watts riots of 1965. There were soldiers riding jeeps with machine guns through my neighborhood. I remember the day that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in 1968. All of the black kids at school were furious, and I was caught up in that anger. We all wanted to become Black Panthers. Now, my home life was typically Japanese-American. Having lived through the internment camps, my mother and father wanted me to graduate from college, get a white-collar job, and achieve the American dream. In the 1970s, I was incredibly lucky, and I benefited directly from the forced integration of all white schools and affirmative action. I attended one of the best public junior high schools in Los Angeles, which at the time was about 98% white. My new classmates were all Jewish, whose grandparents, parents, and relatives had survived the horrors of the Nazi concentration camps of World War II. I was shocked to discover that there were white people who were discriminated against because they were Jews for their religious beliefs. As a Buddhist, I could identify with being a minority religion in one nation under God, but at least they believed in the same God as the Christians, where I put my faith in Buddha. It was around this time that I realized I was a racist. I remember my uncles and aunties getting together at family gatherings and talking about kurombo, which translates from Japanese as little blackies, and Ichi, which was the secret code word for Jews. In Japanese, ku means 9, and ichi means 1, which added together equal Jew, or 10. Kuichi equals Jew. All of us kids, my brother and sister, my cousins, we all thought Kuichi was the secret code word for Jews. We thought this was hilarious. Despite us all being minorities, people who were discriminated against and at a disadvantage because of the color of our skin, we looked down on kurombo, black people, kuichi, Jewish people. And oh boy, don't get me started about those lazy Mexicans and those fresh off the boat Koreans. I went to Japan for the first time in 1981, where I was in for an even bigger shock. Arriving at Narita International Airport, I sensed something was not right. And suddenly I realized, hey, everyone looks like me. And boy, those white kids really stand out. So being Japanese American in Japan, being perceived as one of the majority for the first time in my life was a shock. Until I opened my mouth and everyone thought I was brain damaged because my Japanese was so bad. But that's a different story. I learned that simply because I looked Japanese, I was treated as a Japanese. I was expected to be Japanese, to speak Japanese perfectly, and to act Japanese, to follow the rules and politeness protocols. Being from Los Angeles, being a third-generation Japanese American who still walked and talked like a black kid, I struggled with the way I was perceived every day. But I learned to speak Japanese fluently. I adapted, I improvised, I overcame. And then I met Mimi and fell in love. So these inconceivable causes and conditions of my life led to a 25-year career in Japan, Asia Pacific, and China, which eventually led me back to my Buddhist roots, and now my final career as a Buddhist priest and temple minister in Hawaii. But I'm still a racist. Now, part of me feels the pain and suffering of my black brothers and sisters in 2020, which makes me think that I can identify with the Black Lives Matter movement. But part of me says, better them than me. Part of me says, I'm not racist. That part of me says, I'm better than those racists. But I know that's just my ego talking. In the light of wisdom, it's very clear that it's just my ego talking. I'd like to think that because of my parents' experience, because of the advantage I enjoyed arising from systemic racism, that I am not a racist. But I'm a racist. And this is what Shinran teaches us 750 years later. When a person realizes the mind of non-discrimination, that attainment is the state of regarding each being as one's only child. This is none other than Buddha nature. We will awaken to it on reaching the land of peace. The words of Shinran Shonin. So it is human nature to look for easy answers to the complex issues facing our nation today. It is all too easy to say, I'm Buddhist. All lives matter. But that twists the meaning of Black Lives Matter. What Buddhism teaches is all life matters. All life matters. Not just human beings, but all life matters. But this too is the easy answer to a complex problem. Jodo Shinshu Buddhism doesn't provide any easy answers. Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, in the Hongwanji tradition, as taught by Shinran Shonin, forces me to confront my true nature. I am a racist. I have benefited from the systemic racism against black people in America. I benefited from the forced integration of white schools and preferential admissions policies under affirmative action to get into a good university. I have experienced racism, yes, but I have never been stopped by the police just because of the color of my skin. I have never had people look at me with suspicion and fear because of the color of my skin. The reality is that I have ignored the pain, suffering, and injustice endured by my black brothers and sisters for too long, for my entire life. I am a racist. The racist is me. Jodo Shinshu is not a comforting form of Buddhism. Jodo Shinshu demands that we relentlessly self-reflect with absolute clarity, to look deep inside ourselves, to confront our ego self, our true human nature, to awaken to how our thoughts, words, and actions impact other people and all forms of life. Jodo Shinshu forces me to realize that I am guilty of ignoring the reality of Black Lives Matter. When Shinran says, we will awaken to it, we will awaken to Buddha nature when we reach the land of peace. That means after we're born in the Pure Land, after we are dead and free of the limitations of this human mind and human body. This is a brutally realistic view of human nature, not the egocentric false pretense that I'm a good person and I'm not a racist. Shinran is teaching us that it is impossible for us as Bonbu, as ordinary foolish human beings, to magically become not racist through our own self-power, to not discriminate, to not judge others, to not take for granted the advantages and privileges that we enjoy. Through our own self-power, it is not possible for us to conquer our mind of discrimination while we remain in this human form. It is not possible for us to become truly not racist. It is only when we realize this truth of human existence that we awaken to the great compassion and the mind of non-discrimination that is the other power of Amida Buddha working in our lives. It is only when I admit that I'm the racist that I can begin to understand that I will never experience the pain and suffering of my black brothers and sisters, the pain and suffering of all people of color, all people who are different, all people who suffer from a system designed to create inequality and benefit only a chosen few. It is only when I admit to myself, I'm the racist, that I can stop pointing the finger at other people and saying, they are the racists, not me. The promise of Amida's vow is that we will awaken to the mind of non-discrimination and we will become one with Amida, all-inclusive wisdom and all-embracing compassion when we are born in the Pure Land. And when we accept the assurance that when we are born in the Pure Land, when we die, we will realize the mind of non-discrimination, Buddha nature. And then, and only then, in that moment, we awaken to Amida's compassion and working in our lives right now. Amida vows to save us, just as we are, through birth in the Pure Land. And knowing with absolute conviction that we are embraced by Amida, never to be abandoned in this life, then we are totally free. It is up to us to decide what we will do with our unrepeatable life in the time that we have remaining before we are born in the Pure Land. The Black Lives Matter movement provides us with a rare and precious opportunity to truly look at ourselves today, right now. Awakening to reality as it is and accepting I'm a racist is the first step toward changing our thoughts, words, and actions, and working together with others in building an anti-racist America and a world where inequality is vanquished. Change begins with me, today, right here, right now. And thus, I am profoundly grateful that Amida's light of wisdom shines on me, that Amida's great compassion touches my heart, and urging me not to despair, but to have hope. There is hope for me. There is hope for our Black brothers and sisters. There is hope for all people who suffer from inequality and injustice. There is hope because Amida's boundless compassion embraces all people without discrimination or judgment. There is hope because Amida's infinite light of wisdom illuminates all people without discrimination or judgment. The path of Nembutsu is as difficult as saying, I'm a racist. And the path of Nembutsu is as easy as saying, Namo Amida Butsu, in gratitude and joy. When I asked our 8-year-old granddaughter, what do you see when you look at this image of the rainbow Sagari Fuji against a black and white background? Melody said, I see hope. Our children and grandchildren only see beautiful rainbows where each individual color is free to shine brightly just as they are. Do I see rainbows? Do you see rainbows? Can't we all just see rainbows? Can't we all just see hope? Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu.